Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. I have another incredible, not only a guest lined up for you today, but a guest mentor for one of our Mentoring Moments episodes. I would like to welcome Paula BRUNO to the pod. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you very much, Jason. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so thankful you could join me today. And you said you had to run out to Best Buy last night because I requested a proper microphone so that I could hear you correctly. So I appreciate the extra effort to be on the pod.
I should get an A+.
You do. You get an automatic A+ out of the gate even before we start chatting. Now, before we get into the deep dive of kind of what you do in your business, what drew you into this wonderful world of branding, personal and professional branding, brand building, PR, this side of the industry that feels almost more artistic than it does feel technical? What drew you into this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great opening question. My background is actually finance. My graduate degree is finance, and I worked as an M&A VP for a couple of different companies. So I was totally finance. And then when I had kids, I took a couple of years off to try and figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go next and where I wanted to pivot. And during that time frame, I had a mentor who introduced me to a lot of different women's groups, angel investing groups, etc. And so there was one in particular group that I used to go to, and there would be people who would be coming in, entrepreneurs talking about their business, talking about trying to get funding, etc. And then I hooked up with this one woman who was my initial partner in this business, and we hit it off. I was just fascinated by the whole landscape. It was in 2008 when things were like so nascent. It was really basically blogs and Twitter. And if brands wanted to get exposure, it was all via blogs and or Twitter parties. Hashtag girls night out every Tuesday, girls night out. And all the girls would congregate, girls meaning women in this space, bloggers would congregate on Twitter and talk about a specific topic. It's fascinating. I feel like we've come full circle. And we'll talk about that later. But anyway, that's how I got started. I was just fascinated by it. Met someone, she had started something, just started initially thinking about it, and then just took off from there.
Wow. What in a crazy, you sounds like you had this idea or this epiphany right in the middle of the GFC. And people oftentimes talk about, when's the best time to start a business? When the economy is roaring. And in my experience, it's actually the exact opposite. If you can build a sustainable business during an economic downturn, when it comes back out the other side, you'll be on a rocket ship ride. And so if you can create a sustainable business model during tough times, if you can be a wartime general, it's a lot easier to be a peacetime general after that, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things that go into the longevity of having a business and being an entrepreneur. I think that it's funny that you say that because I just was thinking about our company values and what really drives us. And one of those things there's a whole host of things, but it's perseverance. It's not luck. It's like hard work. And I get a lot of no's. I'm using somebody else, etc. And it's all about persevering in the good times and the bad.
Oh, I couldn't agree more as an entrepreneur myself, and having been built agencies and now building an independent consultancy and having an e-commerce pure play back in the day many years ago of my own. I tell you, it is the thing I say about entrepreneurship is it's a roller coaster, right? But if we can at least remove some of the variables, or at least lock down some of the variables around pipeline, around building brand, around making sure that we don't necessarily have to rely on the Metas and the Googles of the world for every single penny that we make and the gatekeepers out there, I think that puts us in a much better position than having to spend a lot of our hard-earned money to keep our pipeline full. And for me, for example, I wouldn't have my current consulting business, if I hadn't been a creator for the last decade plus, have the business that I have today, or at least it wouldn't look anything like what my
Mhm.
business looks like today. And so
Totally.
I think creating an audience that actually wants to hear from you on a regular basis before you need to monetize them, that to me feels like a really important thing. So what do you say to people out there that go, I'm not really comfortable. I'm not really comfortable creating content. I'm not really comfortable having my face out there. I'm not really comfortable writing blogs, or I'm not comfortable on social. What do you say when your clients come to you and they say, we know we need to do this, but this is so not natural for me to do?
So, a couple of things. I have not been a huge person that's been out there on social because I've been so busy building my business and working with brands and trying to get them exposure. And just over the last, like, I made a commitment this year that, hey, I'm doing this for everybody else. Like, why am I not out there myself creating this content? But when a brand comes to me and they're not in the conversation yet, I do have strategy calls that they need to be in the conversation. This is where it's at. Like, influencer marketing has been where it's at for years, and now it's just, this is where most of your marketing dollars should be.
And so do you feel like for people and or brands that either, so let's say I don't know, let's say it's a clothing brand or something like that, that it's founder led, it's founder owned still, and that founder doesn't necessarily have a huge social following of their own. The brand, they don't necessarily know how to build a massive social following. They don't necessarily know how to build one for themselves nor their brand.
Right.
Do you feel like influencer marketing is I feel like influencer marketing definitely came into its own starting a few years ago, and it became like the norm, especially for fashion brands, especially for brands that have an aesthetic component to them of
Yep.
some
Beauty.
beauty, things
Lifestyle.
like that.
Yep.
Yeah, anything aesthetic, anything that has some kind of visual component to it feels like it lends itself really well to influencer marketing. But I almost feel like influencer marketing has moved on to the point where we just call it marketing because, yes, it's one component of marketing. Yes, we still refer to email marketing as email marketing. And yes, we still
Right.
refer to content marketing as content marketing. But I feel like it's become such an intrinsic part of the overall marketing mix for so many brands that it has gone from this niche thing to something that most brands probably need to try to take advantage of.
Or they're already in it. Yeah. Yes, I totally agree.
And,
Totally
and so
agree.
do you think it's become more respectable in a way?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. Way more respectable. Most brands are in it. Now, let's go back to the smaller brand, like the entrepreneur that has a clothing company. You should be out there. That's how you're going to build your brand. If I was starting a clothing brand right now, or any brand, the first thing I would be doing is building my own platform and then weaving in my product.
And you know how when brands, if we go back even 5 to 10 years ago,
Yeah.
when brands were brand new, there was primarily two focuses when they first started up. They would do lots of SEO work for long-term brand building and long-term traffic generation. But then they would immediately start doing performance marketing. So they would run
Yes.
Meta ads, they'd run Google ads, et cetera, for that immediate hit of traffic to try to get some throughput into their website. Then they could start looking at conversion rate optimization. They could start looking at all these other things. They could start looking at building up their email list, et cetera.
Correct.
But it feels like for many brands now, the first port of call actually should be influencer marketing as opposed to necessarily even performance marketing. And how do you see that evolving startup brand mentality and kind of those first steps to start building some sort of a following that you can build some kind of brand loyalty off of? Have you seen that evolve over the last five plus years?
Yeah, I think you're seeing a lot more creators get into developing their own brands by themselves and or with another larger brand. Take Alex Earl, who just did a partnership with Frame. Her partnership, they have a pair of Frame jeans that are called the Alex Earl skinny jeans. That's a whole trend. And then Super Bowl, you saw someone wearing AG flare jeans. And then you have much smaller, then I'm talking about, you have Charlie D'Amelio and Duncan. You have a lot of influencers who are working directly with brands to create their own brand product. But then you also have just influencers who are creating their own products and marketing them. And the smart ones are getting out there first on social and creating their own brand, creating their own brand for their own person versus the product.
And I'm also seeing a little bit of an evolution in the sense that instead of maybe new brands or even well-established brands, instead of them just going and doing an influencer marketing agreement or program with an influencer, they're actually offering them equity in the business. And they're saying, hey, look, we want this to be a long-term partnership that has a long-term benefit to both of us. Sure, we could pay you $20,000 for a post on Instagram, or we can bring you into the business, help you actually define the strategic direction of the business from a creative perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a branding perspective, etc. And we're willing to give you equity as part of that deal to make the relationship in a nutshell. I think we're moving away from a pure transactional nature of working with influencers in many instances to more of a true partnership. In many cases, that includes equity. Are you seeing that transition too?
I have heard of those types of deals. We have not actually worked with any deals that are equity based, but I can see that being a long-term play, most definitely. I don't know if Alex Earl got equity in Frame or any of the other influencers that are co-creating products. That would be a logical next step.
And it feels like influencer marketing has also not necessarily taken the place of, but is the next version of some of the traditional brand collabs we maybe have seen in the past. And I'll give you one example. So Ford famously for a long time did a collab with Eddie Bauer, and they actually
Mm,
came out with Eddie Bauer versions of their product. So you could buy an Eddie Bauer version of an Explorer where
right.
Eddie Bauer was on the floor mats and it was on the design, it was just stitched into the seats and
Yeah,
everything else. And I've seen collabs with Porsche Design, for example, where they've done collabs with furniture makers and pen designers. And there are these branded collabs where I'm taking the best parts of what I do, you're taking the best parts of what you do, we're mixing these together, and it's creating co-branded exposure for both of our brands, and it's lifting the brand exposure with both of our brands. And it feels like influencers now seem to be looking for not just what can I get out of this monetarily, but by partnering with this brand, is it going to elevate my personal brand at the same time? And it feels like they're
totally.
becoming more choosy about who they partner with as a result.
Oh, totally. The influencers we work with are very choosy about what brands they want to work with. So they're not going to just, if it doesn't fit their values and their ethos, they will say no.
And do you see yourself almost like a modern day sports agent of sorts? Like you're the modern day version of a sports agent, but you're almost like an influencer agent in that respect, because
I
we do see influencer marketing marketplaces spring up, but there still is a heavy human component involved. And what do you see your role in the industry as?
Totally. I feel that there are so many different players in this field. So you have your pure technology, your SaaS platforms where you can go and buy seats and search for influencers. We have a platform as well that we use to do the initial research, but it goes deeper than that, right? Because yeah, technology can give you all these influencers that fit certain criteria that you put in, and even if they're AI driven, they're going to spit out some names, but it really takes the researchers from my team to get in there and dig to see, okay, what type of content do they make, what platforms are they on, is it what you know like what is the format of their content, is it like a get ready with me, is it more vlog style, is that what the brand is looking for, what are their comments like, are people really invested in them, or do they have a lot of comments like get that bag, or is it really thoughtful comments from people who are really invested in the creator? I feel like we have a pretty integral part in terms of, I want to say we're like a connector, right? I like to view myself as a connector between the brand and the talent manager. It's not transactional for me. Like, I'm not going to just find an influencer, even if they are the right fit. I want it to be purely beneficial for both the brand as well as the creator. And I'm going to work really hard for the brand. And I'm also going to work really hard for the creator to make sure that the creator is successful by being very open and transparent about deliverables up front and giving them a well crafted brief that we actually spend time talking about. Not that I just send to their manager and say, hey, here's the brief, go over it, and then it never sees the light of day, right? We actually have calls with all of our influencers that we work with just to look them in the face, just look them in the eye, just to see, hey, are you invested in this product? Are you invested in this brand? What are your creative ideas surrounding this? Let's brainstorm a little just to see what they're like. How are they invested? So I feel there are many different players, but ours is pretty integral in terms of the value that we bring to both the brand and the influencer.
And what do you think about and obviously this has changed radically since '08, but what do you think about the rise of micro influencers as brands in their own right? And the fact that in some instances we see that micro influencers, let's call it 20,000 followers or less on a platform like Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
that oftentimes they exert greater influence in their specific vertical or niche than someone who has 10 million followers from all different shapes and stripes of the world. Obviously, The Rock, for example, he's going to be able to push Terramana, and he's going to be able to push Zoa, and he's going to be able to push all these private label products that he's built for himself. But I almost feel like somebody like The Rock isn't necessarily going to make as good of an influencer. First of all, most people can't afford him. But even if
Right.
they could, I feel like because of the variety of following that he has and the scale of following that he has, it would be hard to define a niche that would make a great third-party partnership with him versus maybe a micro influencer in your niche that only has 20,000, 25,000 followers, but man, do they hang on every word and every post that influencer makes.
Totally. We're seeing a lot of that. We always recommend doing a more tiered approach when we're working with brands. We do like to work with the larger influencers if they're the right fit, but we do recommend working with those micro influencers because they are very connected to their audience, and their audience really, looks up to them, they trust them. And we've seen it time and time again where we've worked with a really large influencer. Just this past year, we worked with an influencer who had 5 million on TikTok. Let's call it combined reach, 5 million. Then we worked with a much smaller influencer, a couple 100,000 combined reach. The one who had a couple 100,000 combined reach actually got more views and a higher engagement rate than the one with 5 million. And now it's also the algorithm, right? Who knows what's going on with the algorithm? Anybody can go viral. You don't have to be 5 million to get those a couple 100,000 views. And it totally proved it out. And it was a really great thing to see.
And do you find it easier or harder from an engagement perspective to work with the bigger influencers or the smaller influencers? I'd imagine that the bigger influencers, totally professional, have standardized rate cards, have talent management, have somebody to engage with, have standard engagement channels that they engage with, whereas the smaller influencers, they sometimes don't even know what they have. They don't have a standardized rate card. They don't have a standardized method of engagement. They usually don't have a talent management agency that they're working with or something like that. And so sometimes when you start to work with these smaller influencers, is it harder to even open the dialogue and get the dialogue
It is.
started?
It's some of them are more professional than others, and some of them who potentially have only worked with a couple of brands before or who are newly getting into working with brands. It's a lot of educating on rates, educating on what they can be charging, and then the usage, educating on usage, educating on exclusivity, etc. And sometimes sometimes it's really even hard to find those influencers because they don't put contact information anywhere. Hello, like, we want to work with you. Like, include your contact information somewhere. Include your email in your Instagram, right? And actually look at your email, right? Maybe they're
Have a
getting
link tree or something, for God's sake.
something. It's mind-boggling how many we run. It's not just once or twice a year that we run into that. It's over and over again. We run into someone that we really want to work with, and we'll have to like search not only on all of their socials. One time, we even went as far as went on LinkedIn, found out where they worked, and called their place of employment to ask, "Hey, we're trying to reach you." And when we did reach him, he was like, "I just thought it was spam. Like, I just thought someone was like it was just spam. I didn't really think that any brand would want to work with me."
Wow. Wow. And do you represent, so let's say this creator said, hey, look, I don't know how this game works. I'd love to work with you, but I'd also love to work with you on a more formalized creator representation basis as opposed to just working on this one campaign or this one opportunity. I'd like to be able to channel all of my inbound requests for this kind of stuff directly to you. Do you represent creators as well as brands as
Yeah,
part of your
no,
work?
I we don't, and I am not a proponent of that. I am a proponent of an agency or a talent manager. It's really hard to straddle both worlds and be fair to both, right? So if I have a client or a brand, am I going to pitch him my roster? Or am I going to pitch him? Am I going to pitch the best creator I can find? Right? We don't manage talent. Can we manage talent? Yes, we can, but we don't manage talent. And there are definitely some agencies that are just strictly agency like we are, but then there are some that are talent manager and agency. And then you have a lot of just talent managers. It's pretty crowded right now for talent managers.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I
But it
guess the
came in to
biggest,
swoop everybody up.
yeah, they want them on their roster. They want to be the exclusive representative of that, of those, the top talent. And I guess it's like any business. Not all talent is created equal, and the top 1 to 3% really need some solid support. But then there's lots of, it almost feels old school Hollywood talent managers, and it feels like trying to navigate that
Mm.
as young new talent, for example, must feel like shark infested waters, and you don't want to sign up with the first talent management agency. You need something, you need to take action because brands are reaching out to you, or agencies like you are reaching out to them, and so they feel, it must feel like, my God,
Like,
it's hard to
who do
know
I
who.
trust?
Yeah,
I think and there are a lot of really good talent managers, and it's just finding it's they're all good. So it's just finding the one that you click with and that maybe their representation is heavy in your niche, right? So they really understand your niche. But there are so many great talent managers out there, and I think that they do their job better than we would do their job. So they make our job a lot easier in terms of if I need to source a couple of influencers within a specific geographic area that have a couple of different other filters that we're looking for, I can tap the talent managers and just say, "Hey, I'm looking for XXX in this city. Do you have any?" So they know their talent a lot better.
and would they go out and try to secure new talent on your behalf if they don't have anybody necessarily on their roster that is a fit?
No,
Will they sometimes try out and go to find specifically
no.
for you?
No,
Interesting.
it's really the onus is on us to find the influencers, and believe me, there's more than enough talent managers and influencers for us to be able to find. It's just actually doing the research and vetting that takes the longest in any campaign. It's like
Eh,
putting a piece of puzzle. It's like putting a puzzle together, right? You're trying to find the right mix of macro celebrity, micro, mid-tier creators, within a certain niche, and you're trying to get different voices. You don't want to overplay one voice. So you're trying to really, it's really like a chess game. You're trying to really put it all together.
And as part of your agency work, do you consider your role more strategic in nature, or actually you get into the tactics as well? So do you go beyond just creating briefs and actually maybe even creating some of the collateral, creating some of the creative itself that then gets deployed by the influencers? Or is it, no, we're gonna maybe work on a campaign by campaign basis. We're gonna put solid briefs together, and then we're gonna let the talent run with that from there and put their own spin on it and do everything themselves? What level of involvement do you usually play in the creative elements?
That's a great question. So it really depends on what the brand wants. So some brands are very hands off in terms of they want the creator to create. Other brands are more scripted. So we get way more involved in the brief, and we get way more involved in content creation and the messaging that they can create, and we get involved in potentially editing the video if it's just been, say, if it just can't get to the point where we need it to get to. So it is all really client driven from our.
And how often does your client expect the creator to send you like a draft of
Oh,
the content for
oh,
their sort
all
of
the time.
approval and sign off?
Oh, have it in our contracts that we like to have 2 rounds of approvals when edits, depending upon the size of the influencer. Sometimes we'll only get 1 round, but we usually try to shoot for 2 rounds of, let us look at it, let us potentially edit it. With the bigger influencers, you may not get reshoots. You may only get a reshoot if they don't follow the brand, or if there's some type of copyright or trademark within the content that they're creating. However, we always get a few rounds. We try to get a few rounds of edits for the brand, because invariably, even if we have a briefing call, invariably something will happen that got in there that shouldn't be in there, or the messaging needs to be tweaked a little bit, or something's not spelled right, or something's not said right, or so you do need those edit rights.
And do you find the longer that a brand works with a specific creator, the faster the turnaround time, the faster the workflow starts to happen, because they start to get a better feel for what the brand's expectations are as part of that editing process?
I feel like the influencers and the talent managers that we work with on a yearly basis over and over again, we have a really good working relationship. They know what to expect from us. They know that we how we like things. They know that we're very detailed up front, and that we're detailed up front because we are trying to avoid the edit. We're trying to avoid the reshoot, right? That's why we want to get you and your creator on the phone. That's why we want to have an in-person call, briefing call, not just with you, manager, but with your talent. And we can tell, is the influencer late? Are they coming? Have they already read the brief? Because we sent them the brief. Have they read it? Do they have any questions? Are they invested? Do they seem interested? So there's a lot of different other cues we get from having those briefing calls.
And do you find that there is a formula that applies to a creator around the percentage of their content output that is promoted? So, for example, you might say, hey, look, if more than 10% of their content is promoted content or branded content or clearly marketing focused content, then that's too much. Or I see some influencers where half their content is brand collabs. And I feel like their influence will diminish over time
Totally.
in that environment.
Totally. We so when we're vetting influencers, besides looking at views, engagement, content, etc., we do look at the ratio of sponsored to non-sponsored content. And there's no hard and fast. We don't have a hard and fast rule, but I would say like a 20% threshold would be a good threshold that we look at. If we see someone who is consistently doing sponsored content and not doing any organic content to develop their audience, like that would be a red flag.
Yeah, makes sense, because I know that I've unfollowed, even in subjects and topics that I'm interested in, I've unfollowed certain creators where like 50 every second post is some kind of promoted sponsored post, and this is getting old. This is getting
Because
old.
you followed them because they were providing value. And I think that in 2025, I think one of the most important things that we're going to see in 2025 with all of the content out there and all of the influencers, everybody wanting to be an influencer in some way, shape, or form, I think that share of voice, shareability, and share of voice is going to become so important that you're really going to have to provide value to your audience and not just sponsored content.
And what's your position on podcast creators? And what is your position on the influence that, especially, based on the elections and based
Oh,
on
yeah.
lots of things that happened over the last year in particular, it feels like podcast creators are really getting their time in the sun now. And whereas before they were, I think, in many respects considered almost like a second class creator versus, say, an Instagram influencer or a TikTok influencer or something like that, that they were considered way down the totem pole in terms of the type of talent most brands would want to work with. But it feels like that mindset is definitely starting to shift. But it's just that there are fewer really winning podcasts out there with a decent sized audience. There's fewer as a percentage, it feels like, out there with a decent sized audience versus creators in the social space with a decent sized audience. So there's probably it's probably a smaller cohort of potential podcasts to partner with or podcast creators to partner with. But I'd love your thoughts on the rise of podcasts as influence in society.
Yeah. A colleague of mine back in 2000, I think 2010, 2013, she was all into podcasts, like way beyond her time, right? And so we have always been a huge proponent of podcasts, right? And it's been slow for brands to adopt, to put their arms around it for a lot of different reasons. How do you really What's the measurement? What's the measurement surrounding a podcast? I think is the biggest thing. I think that's one of the biggest hurdles that we have to get through with our brand clients, right? So, and then it's the pricing model. What does the pricing model look like? How many mentions? Is it quote, a dedicated podcast, or how many mentions, and when does that mention happen? And how many times does it happen? And, is the product shown? Is it just spoken about, etc.? So I think podcasts are having a moment, definitely. I think everyone's rushing to get into podcasting, by the way.
Yes.
Um, Based on my Best Buy. I went there last night. It looks like everybody was trying to they had all this whole section for podcasting. It looks like everybody's trying to get into podcasting. I do think it's going to evolve this year. I do see more and more brands wanting to get into it. And now it's going to be measurement.
I mean, as a podcaster with nearly 500 episodes, I feel that pain, and it certainly is. And it's hard for even us as podcasters to necessarily be able to put a value on what we do and put a value on access to our audience and all the effort that we have to put in to promote our podcast to increase our listenership. That has a cost to it, both in time and in many cases money, because a lot of podcasters are doing paid and performance marketing for their podcast to increase its listenerships. So there are some underlying costs, there's some tech costs, there's some production costs, all that sort of stuff. And so
Totally.
it is hard for us as podcasters to sometimes even value our own work. And that's so if somebody like you came to me, it's a hard discussion to have, because we don't necessarily there's no hard and fast rules in the podcasting promotion space, just like there's no hard and fast rules necessarily in the influencer marketing space. And so and I feel like it's a crossover medium as well, because there's some short form podcasts, there's some long form podcasts, there's some
Mm-hmm.
solo podcasts, there's some
Mm-hmm.
interview podcasts, there's so many different formats of podcasts. And then of course, most podcasts now, like I started out as audio only, and now I'm also producing video and I'm on YouTube, and so that I can also slice and dice for shorts and for short video
Oh, I
content.
think you have
So
to be. I think you have to be on video.
yeah, it's a
I
must
don't
have
think it
now.
can just be, yeah, I just don't think it can be. I think it has to be on video as well as just voice if you're going to do a podcast. I think that's where the value comes in my mind.
Being omni-channel with your podcast, I think, is pretty
Exactly.
important, isn't it?
It is. It's very important. And you mentioned something about you can't really tell influencers what to charge as well. Like, how do you know? But you have like guardrails. We have guardrails based upon all of our years of experience as to what an influencer should be charging. So if they come to us with some crazy number, we'll be like, that doesn't make sense. Whereas we just don't, there's not a lot of experience with podcasting, right? So the baseline is just a little bit like a little fuzzy.
Yeah, and I think that with the added competition, but pod fade is also a thing. So whilst there's, I don't know, there's hundreds of thousands of podcasts being created per year, still, I think the statistic is something like 98% of podcasts never get past episode 20, and like over 99% of podcasts never get past episode 50. And so I think longevity to me feels like a really important metric for a podcast. If you get to 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 episodes, that to me feels okay.
That's a
This
legit
person is,
podcast.
they're pretty committed. They're pretty committed to their craft. If you got to be in this for the long haul, if you're going to put that much effort into it, and you're going to continue to expand the way that you do your podcast, and maybe the numbers of episodes a week you release and the number of formats you release it in, I feel like if you're that committed, then that's a pretty good signal that this may make for a pretty good partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree on
And
that.
And do you, for influencers, does the time that they have been in the market or the time it took them to get, I guess you don't necessarily know if you're working with or you're doing research on an Instagram influencer, is there any access to data over what period of time it took them to say, get to 20,000 followers? Or do you know, okay, man, they grew their following in 12 months, or, oh, it took them 5 years to get to 20,000 followers. It feels like the time it took them to build that influence would have an impact on the value of that influence.
That's a good point. There are ways to tell their audience. You can look at back end, you can look at their audience growth when you can get some parameters like, and for us, I think it doesn't so much matter like how fast they grew or how long it took them to grow. I think it's more about, for me anyway, it's really about the quality. It's about quality content. And I'm not saying like quality meaning value. I'm looking what type of value are they providing their audience, and why is someone going to go watch them over and over again, and how committed are they? How committed are they? And let's just talk, okay, so someone has a viral video and they get 10 million views. Does that mean, what does that mean? Okay, that's really driven by the algorithm, right? I don't know if just one video at 10 million is going to warrant us paying more money for them, unless it becomes more consistent where their views are consistently higher. But that one viral video, it's not going to warrant us paying them a lot more.
And is it always obvious to you if a creator has gone out and tried to buy 10,000 Instagram followers or 20,000 Instagram followers to pad their account and make them look more influential than they are? Is it always pretty obvious to you when a creator has done that and
Yeah.
you discount them out of the gate?
You know what? We usually, like, if say a creator we get it and it gets on our first round, right? It gets on our first round, our list, our target list, and we see it. And once we start digging, if we do dig and we see some abnormalities, either in the comments or that it looks funny, the engagement rate looks off, we'll do some more digging with our technology partner and actually ask them to run a report that can tell how much of their audience is true or how much of it is fake. Let's just call it
Yeah.
fake.
Bots, essentially,
Yeah.
right? Bot
Yeah.
accounts. Wow, what an interesting, and it's great to have you on because this is so foreign to me. This whole industry is
And
obviously
I
I'm a
could
very,
talk all day about it. I love it. We could do another follow-up. We could be more specific. We could dive into any topic that you wanted to. It could be more of a deep dive into a specific topic.
love it. And what types of brands typically make the best clients for you? If you were to describe your ICP for me and for my audience, what type of brands make great agency customers of yours and great partners for creators to partner with? What are some of the attributes you look for in your ICP?
Brands that trust us. That's one of the big things is brands that trust us. They know, I understand that sometimes they need to, I guess, script the message or get into the messaging more. Are the brands that are probably that we love to work with are those brands that trust us completely to handle the process. They are true partners and they hand it off to us, and they want check-ins, but they're not micromanaging the process because they know that's why they came to us, because we're the ones that can manage it for them. So we're looking for true partners. We're looking for brands that are looking for a true partner with a team that has been in the industry for a long period of time.
And do you find that your clients that you worked with for multiple years, do you find that they will take more of a hands-off approach depending on channel? Like, for example, I know that Bose, for example, across most of their channels, they have very serious marketing. Like, it's all about the tech, it's very high class, it's whatever. But then you look at their TikTok and it's so chill, it's almost hilarious, the difference in style of marketing that somebody like a Bose will do on TikTok versus Instagram or versus LinkedIn or versus some of the other marketing channels that they market through, even TVCs, print ads, etc. And do you find that most of your clients will take a much more hands-off approach to creative on something like a TikTok versus an Instagram where the aesthetic might really matter to them?
I think it depends on the client, and I think it depends on the product, and I think it depends on how long we've been working with them. Sometimes, even though it's TikTok, there's a lot that goes on. There's just so much that goes on to create that content that looks unpolished, but it's really been very well thought out by both the brand as well as us as to how it's going to come across. So, hands off. If we've been working with them for a few years, yeah, I think that they're more hands off in terms of just trusting the process, that if something doesn't look right, we're going to let them know when we get the draft, because we're not going to just post it or have the influencer post it without getting approval, without it going through that. First, it has to go through us. And then we make a bunch of different comments. We have different, we have people looking at it all, looking at the draft, and then we send it to the client and say, here's our thoughts. What do you think? You give us. So we try to give the influencer that consolidated feedback. But I guess getting to your point is it really depends on
Yeah,
the product.
totally. And what is your current favorite social media platform for influencers or to work with influencers? What is your current hottest social platform right now?
I still think it's TikTok. I still think that it's the hottest. It's the hottest. Is it something I'm going to recommend that clients go into without knowing all the risks? No. I think that there's going to have to be a lot of contractual agreements that have to be drawn up with what happens if TikTok goes away, which it could. But I am seeing a lot of influencers now go to Reels and YouTube. I think my second favorite, just my favorite is TikTok, because it's just it it's more real, it's more real time, it's more it just feels more real.
Raw
Yeah.
and disruptive is how I would, it was what
Yeah.
I think. When I think of TikTok, I think of it as raw and disruptive.
But I think one of the best performing platforms is YouTube for us.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, for me, I love YouTube. It's a bastard of a platform to get traction on, but
Yep.
I tell you, I'm seeing far more traction with shorts than I am with my long form videos on YouTube, but I
Hmm.
always refer the shorts back to their long form parent to help drive traffic back to the long form parent. But yeah, I love YouTube and I love using it as a consumer of content, and I also love creating for YouTube. But man, is it competitive. The
Yeah,
YouTube is
I think it's super
ridiculously
competitive.
competitive.
And I don't think every content creator can create long form content. It's not in their wheelhouse. If you're a true short form TikTok content creator, and that's how you got millions and millions of followers, I'm not saying you can't easily go to YouTube, but not everybody can.
Yeah.
Long form.
Yeah.
It's a different beast, like you say. It takes a lot to continually, consistently post their longer videos, a lot more editing, it has to be really well thought out.
Great thumbnails, great
Yep.
SEO.
Yep.
It's a heavy lift. It's a
It
heavy
it
lift,
is. It's a
YouTube,
much
right?
heavier lift than a 30-second TikTok video.
It sure is. And boy, the algorithm is tougher to crack on YouTube, and it seems to be shifting faster than TikTok as well. So
Because
man,
everybody's trying to get over there.
it is. I've seen even my reach on my shorts drop as a
Mm.
result of the announced potential TikTok ban. I've seen a lot more people from TikTok make their move to
Oh,
YouTube, and so it's more competitive
it's more
on the
competitive.
shorts side now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's full on, isn't it? Well,
Totally.
what do you think? Give me a percentage of likelihood that TikTok will be banned within the next 6 months in the US. What do you think?
You know
Finger in
what?
the air.
You know what? Before it got banned, I was a diehard, no, it's not going to get banned. So I don't think I'm very good at betting. But now, like I'm actually on Threads a lot. If you're not on Threads, I think you should be. I think brands should be on Threads as well. But there's a lot of different people I follow on Threads as well as Substack, and it's not a given that it's going to last past this 60 days. I honestly don't know. I don't know this. I'm not as confident this time that it's going to keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in the same camp. I think it's well, we obviously know Trump's in favor of keeping it so long as the US can get 50% ownership in the platform. It'd be interesting to see whether the CCP allows that
I
because
know,
they
but
picked
would we want the government to have 50% ownership in a platform? I think it's going to drive people away.
I don't know. CP has pretty much 100% control of TikTok today. So it's
Right.
interesting.
Yeah,
We've got a government that's in control of the platform anyway. So if the US government has 50% control of the platform, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Remains to be seen. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game of chicken
it
being
is.
played by the US government with TikTok. That's for
It
sure.
is.
But they're
It
actually
is.
playing the game of chicken with the CP more than they are with TikTok, to be honest.
I agree. I agree. I agree.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. As we come down to the end of our time together, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned a ton from you. You clearly know your stuff and you've been in this game for a very long time. What would be your piece of advice for either a new or established brand that has never done influencer marketing before and they're seriously considering it for the very first time? What are some of the very first things they should be thinking about before they go out and try to make a pitch or try to go out and find talent to work with or an agency to work with, whatever? What are the first foundational steps they need to think about before they get into the influencer marketing game?
Yeah, I think they need to really hone in on their brand values and what type of content they would want to see on the different platforms and what type of influencer partners would be ideal and what type of niche are they going after and what type of audience. So these platforms are becoming, so is it really the audience demo that you're looking at now? Are you really driven by the audience demo? Because all of these platforms are making it so it's really driven by interest, right? So I think you have to open up who your demo is because these platforms don't follow traditional demos, right? So, like, you may say, oh, my product is really geared towards Gen Z women, but yeah, so you look for Gen Z women influencers, but their audience might be heavily mixed because of the platforms, because of what they talk about. I think that brands have to be aware of how the algorithm works and how these different platform works and figure out a strategy, like where they want to be, what type of messaging do they want to get out, what does the perfect content look like, etc. And then start getting a lay of the land to figure out, do you want to do it in-house? Do you want to get a platform subscription and pay via the seat and run your programs in-house through one of these platforms, or do you want to hire an agency such as ours to run it for you?
And I feel like it would make sense, at least in the beginning, to perhaps work with an agency who knows the lay of the land. It's like at some point, most brands want to bring performance marketing in house, for example, and hire someone full time to do that. But when
Right.
they start out, If they have no experience with performance marketing, it's very difficult to do that yourself and do it successfully and efficiently and with high ROI. And so it feels influencer marketing is similar in that, sure, you may want to bring this in-house at some point, or you may want to hire someone full-time to do this. But if you don't have that resource and you don't really understand how the game is played, an agency can perhaps be a safety net to preventing you from falling into the traditional pitfalls that every brand makes when they first start out with anything new.
Exactly.
Would you say that's even more important when a brand is first starting out to work with an agency that knows the game?
I think so. I definitely think so. Yeah. I
Wow.
mean, you hit all the points as to why. I just didn't want to toot my horn.
No, I respect that. I really respect that. Now, if people want to get a hold of you and they want to learn more about this, I will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, as well as your agency website into the show notes. But other than that, if people want to get a hold of you and learn from you and chat to you about the opportunity that is influencer marketing, what's the best way?
They can email me.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn. They can DM me on LinkedIn. I'm very accessible. And one things I'm working with a brand that I haven't worked with before. I do like to have strategy calls. So I'm all in for finding out what makes them tick, what makes their product so great. Where do you see it going? How can we help? What does the partnership look like? There's a lot of different ways that they can reach me. I'm very accessible.
Not hard to find you.
I'm not hard to find. And when we do work with clients, I don't ghost them. I don't just put a project manager on it and say, all right, goodbye. I am always available, and I always handle the high touch. And I also always handle the negotiations and or anything that, legal that comes in.
I love it. I have
Yeah.
a huge amount of respect for that because, just like you don't want to post and ghost, you don't want to engage in ghost. That's a bad thing if you're an agency. I know because
Yep.
I've run agencies, so I get it.
Yep.
And sometimes you get sold by the A team, but you get delivery by the C team or the D team, and
So,
that's
I
never
don't
a
I don't
nice
want
feeling
I
as a
don't want
brand.
that to happen. I don't want that to happen. So I'm always accessible.
I love it. Listen, now's the point where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. So, Paula BRUNO from Intuition Media Group, IMG, CEO of IMG. What is your question for me today?
I would love to know where you see the whole industry going in 2025.
Look, it's a fun one because I think that what I am seeing, especially on LinkedIn, for example, first of all, reach on LinkedIn is in the toilet compared to what it used to be even 2 years ago. And as someone with 30,000 plus followers, even I am seeing it. But what I am seeing is the rise of the B2B influencer instead of just the retail influencer. I'm seeing the rise of the B2B influencer where they are specialized in an industry or a vertical or a platform or a technology or whatever it is. And they are becoming known for that in the business world. And so I would say business, of course, there's always been Gary Vee and there's always been business influencers, so to speak. But I think what I have seen is the rise of more technical influencers, people that are deep specialists in whatever it is that they do and whatever their passion is in business. They are being much more vocal. They are being much more visible. They have strong opinions and they're not willing to share those opinions. And they're not afraid to offend the odd person here and there with their opinions and their hot takes and their punditry.
Mm.
And I feel like that I've seen that increase, and maybe to a lesser degree, I'm maybe in that bucket, but I definitely think that I'm seeing specialists that have 10, 20, 30 years working in their space,
Hmm.
really starting to get religion around putting out content around that specialization and being really confident in putting that content out there, driving a massive following where they can actually influence buying decisions of technology, of services, etc. And technology brands, for example, wanting to partner with them on platforms like LinkedIn, on webinars, on podcasts, etc., doing co-marketing, co-GTM
Collabs.
planning, and collabs. That is something that even me, as someone who has played in this space for a very long time, I'm seeing this become a lot more obvious in my feed. And it's actually really cool to see because there is so much industry, institutional, tribal knowledge out there that historically has stayed in people's heads, and they've said, hey, that's what makes me uniquely employable, and that's my secret sauce, and I don't want to share that, and that's how I'm going to make a better living by keeping that secret sauce secret. That is people being a lot more vocal about that stuff and saying, I'm going to position myself as an expert in this space, and that means I'm always going to get my slice of the pie, whatever that looks like, because not everybody that sees that content is going to want to go and do that stuff themselves. They're maybe going to want to work with me to do it instead because it's hard. So I'm seeing the rise of the B2B business influencer. That is something that I'm witnessing in real time right in my own feed.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And I think that's one of the reasons even why I started creating content was everybody's doing it, right? I'm not jumping on a bandwagon, but I want to get my expertise out there. Like, why wouldn't I? I have so much knowledge about so many different things in this space. Like, why not get out there and share it?
Yeah, and I'm a massive proponent of the idea that a rising tide floats all boats.
Yep.
And I think that I have a mindset of abundance. And so I think that by putting content out there, I'm actually increasing the size of the pie as opposed to just increasing the slice that I get from that pie. And so I am not worried about, I will share absolutely anything with anyone at any time. I don't believe there's such a thing as a secret sauce. Now, my secret sauce is 25 years in the industry. My secret sauce is I've been doing this. I'm old, and I've been doing this for a shitload of time.
Me too.
And
So that's my secret sauce. I've been in the industry for 20 years, 15, 20 years, and I've seen everything. I've come across every type of contract. I've come across every type of manager, influencer, etc., anything. But one thing I wanted to say, maybe we can close with this. It's funny you mentioned, I really think it's important that we operate from a place of abundance versus scarcity. I used to have this conversation all the time with a friend of mine, and she was a mentor of mine, and was a first woman partner at Goldman Sachs. And she used to always, more women have to operate from a place of abundance, not scarcity. And so I think that's also has been a driving factor with me getting out there and sharing my knowledge.
I'm certainly glad that you are doing that, and I'm certainly appreciative that you chose to share your knowledge with me.
I appreciate yours. It's been great.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.